Let's go talk about the book we all read.
Books, you know they're dangerous.
Some more than others. And so few people read it. This is Wretched Radio. What book are we talking about? Well, two, really. It's a book that talks about a book. One of the best sellers but less read books of all time is the Koran. It is the holy book of depends on what pollster you read. Apparently 1.5 billion, although apparently in America about 2 million, not 8 million, but about 2 million Muslims in the United States. That's their holy book. That's the one that they get their information from to make their decisions. A book that talks about that book is The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Koran. That's the type of title that makes people upset and causes you to get killed. The author of that book is Robert Spencer, our pal from jihadwatch.org. Robert Spencer, New York Times best-selling author, several books. He's written about 8 of them. Focusing on the religion of Islam, this one focusing on the book, because that's where we've got to go. If we are going to determine, is this a religion of peace? Is this a religion of war? Forget what the talking heads say at any given moment. What does their source book say? The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Quran. Robert Spencer, thanks for being with us today, sir.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, Robert, honestly, I kind of joked about it, but it's really not funny. This is the type of title that people have been killed over.
Well, I have gotten 7 death threats in the last couple of weeks, so that's a real thing. But I feel like it's not tremendously likely that we're going to be able to win this thing if we are afraid to talk about it. And we have to talk about every aspect of the ideology of the enemy, and that means we have to go into the Quran, because that's what the jihadis always point to justify what they're doing.
Now, honestly, 7 death threats?
Yes.
And what does one sound like?
What does the death threat sound like?
Yeah.
Well, I happen to be sitting here at my computer. Let me see if I can get you some. These are a few. There was a guy who said that he had followed me home from the supermarket. My wife was very amused by that and said, they know it's not true, since when were you last in the supermarket?
Sure, fair enough. Well, maybe somebody who looked like you.
But in any case, unfortunately, the FBI took it more seriously, and they're monitoring the situation. But the guy said that he had followed me home. I think also, of course, if he really had, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. And that he was going to kill me very soon. And, they all kind of run like that. That dire havoc is going to come upon me very soon. But not quite yet.
Nice. And I think it was in Germany that I just read, Robert. Somebody was going to release a book, and it said something rather nasty about the Quran. I don't even think it was necessary, and I'm not a fan of the Quran by any means. But just the same, they pulled it from publishing because of what it would cause.
Yes. Well, see, this kind of self-censorship is going to kill Western civilization. If we're not willing to stand up for our principles, including the principle of freedom of speech, if we're not willing to protect speech that people are willing to kill you for, then we might as well throw free speech out altogether, because that's the whole idea. Freedom of speech means freedom for unpopular speech. Popular speech, harmless speech, speech that's not controversial, speech that nobody cares about, that doesn't need any protection. But if we are going to close off all sorts of avenues of inquiry and public discussion because of death threats or because of fear, then our society is over, and we might as well give up.
Then let's jump in. The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Quran with Robert Spencer. Robert, the book itself is written in Arabic, and my understanding, based on your book, The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Quran, that's the holy language. That's the language that it really needs to be read and to be understood, correct?
Well, that's what Muslims will tell you, yeah, that it's not the Quran unless it's in Arabic. It has to be in Arabic to be the Quran. And so if it's not in Arabic, it's only the meaning of the Quran. Now, the meaning of the Quran is something that is given by Muslims in many cases, because the Muslims themselves translate the Quran for the sake of fellow Muslims who don't know Arabic. And so I restrict myself to using only those translations so that Muslims can't then turn around and say, oh, but the translation's not accurate.
Right.
But the idea that it can only be understood in Arabic is something that Islamic apologists tend to say when they're confronted with some of the unpleasant things that the Quran says.
You don't understand because it's not in Arabic. And also, the Quran, the prayers have to be quoted in Arabic. Do most of the people praying the prayers or quoting the Quran even understand Arabic?
No. And see, that's the thing. Most Muslims today are not Arabs. And since most Muslims today are not Arabs, but you have to recite the Quran in Arabic, or you're not reciting it, most of the Muslims who are reciting the Quran today around the world are reciting syllables that they don't necessarily know the meaning of. And that's an absolutely true story. There was a Pakistani Muslim who several years back said to me, and this is not a joke, this is a true story, he said, I'm very proud of my religion, and I've memorized almost all of the Quran. One day I intend to get one of those translations and find out what it means.
That's not funny. That's really sad. He memorized the thing. All right. This book called the Quran, by the way, I hate to correct you publicly, but I have to go with my president on this one, Robert Spencer. It's not Pakistani, it's Pakistan. So
Pakistan,
please,
yes,
in
Pakistan.
the future, could you please, we'll get to his speech in a few moments, but first things first, the Quran, tell everybody how this thing was compiled. How did it come together?
Well, the Quran really came together kind of by accident. Muhammad died suddenly in the year 632, and he had made no provision for collecting the Quran together. Various people had memorized various portions of it or written down various portions of it. It was not something that was all together at once at the time Muhammad died. And then there were some battles in which some of the people who had memorized some parts of the Quran were killed, and parts of the Quran were lost. And so then the Islamic leaders decided, well, we're in trouble now. We really better start gathering this thing together. And so they appointed this guy, Zayd ibn Thabit, to gather the Quran, collect the Quran together. And it is clear from the early Islamic traditions about this process that as he gathered it together, and then the Caliph Uthman published the canonical version and all the variants were burned, that some parts were lost. And there are references to various sections of the Quran that once existed that nobody else has, and variations in the text, all of which militates against the traditional Islamic understanding that the Quran is a perfect book that was delivered in a perfect form through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad.
Not so much. Robert, would you please take just a moment and walk us through, some people talk about the Mecca period, the Medina period. Do we see that kind of a tone change in the Quran as it progresses throughout the life of Muhammad?
Oh, yeah. There's a definite tone change. The early surahs, and that's in terms of chronologically, they're actually the ones that are toward the back of the book, because he got a lot more long-winded as time went on. What happened was the early chapters of the Quran, the first revelations that he received, were very short, lyrical, poetic, arresting, apocalyptic, sometimes very deeply affecting in their imagery. And the later ones become very legalistic, long-winded, not poetic at all, and pedantic, full of legal instructions and denunciations and so on. And there's a very big difference in tone. But the biggest difference in tone is the difference between the early surahs, which call for tolerance of other religions, and the later ones which call for warfare against people of other religions.
Now, can you fairly state, Robert Spencer, The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Quran, that in the early surahs, a surah, if you will, is like a Bible verse, chapter and verse, that it was indeed a peaceful religion? Are you willing to state that?
It was a peaceful religion, but we have to understand that when Muhammad was calling for tolerance, when the Quran calls for tolerance, it's not really calling for tolerance of the non-Muslims. What he's doing is calling for tolerance of the Muslims, because the Muslims were a tiny minority in a hostile environment. And so they were the ones that were facing the persecution. So when he was calling for tolerance, it was for his own group. When later he gained the upper hand politically and militarily, he began calling for warfare against those same groups that he had been asking for tolerance before.